Naggaroth. Naggaroth is the land of chill, a bleak and forbidding territory that is as unforgiving as the Dark Elves who have made it their home. Its northern plains are barren and windswept expanses, broken only by jutting outcrops of rock. Magic-stained rivers, their waters sluggish and black, crisscross the ice fields, carving elaborate canyons and deep ravines in the frozen ground. Further south, the thin soil is slightly more fertile, allowing sparse pine forests to grow. Here, the Dark Elves have huge plantations to feed their cities, worked by slaves who labour until they drop dead, their bodies left to nourish the barren soil. Most Dark Elves live in one of the realm's heavily fortified cities, whose sinister pinnacles rise high into the storm-racked sky. These are the most depraved settlements in the known world, where murder lurks in every shadow and the weak are slain for the amusement of the strong. To dwell in a Naggarothi city is to walk side by side with death every day of your short life. Naggarond, the Tower of Cold. Naggarond is the oldest and largest of the Dark Elves cities, and quite likely the most malevolent place in the world. Its outer walls form an imposing circlet of black stone, in no place less than 100 feet tall. About the ramparts are set 100 towers, each rising as high above the battlements as the walls rise above the bare rock. From these towers fly the Witch King's dark banners of flayed skin. Severed heads and raven-worried limbs rot upon spikes about the walls, grisly reminders of the price of denying Malekith's will. Behind its impenetrable walls, Naggarond rises high into the foothills of the Iron Mountains. The city is a jumble of mansions, barracks, temples, slave pits, and crooked alleys, all swathed in a perpetual pall of smoke. Through chill day and frozen night, worshippers of Cain tear beating hearts and tangled entrails from their still-living victims, and cast them into the flame pits of their hungry god. Thus is the very air of Naggarond thick with the essence of murder. Few walk carelessly through these streets. Those seeking sacrifices make no distinction for rank or loyalty. Cain's thirst is slaked as readily by the highest of dreadlords as it is by the lowliest of slaves. Murder and thievery of all kinds are rife, for the Witch King tolerates any and all deeds, save for those that inconvenience his rule. Indeed, Malekith provokes discord, for anarchy serves to weed out the weak and thus make his people stronger. To this end, he deliberately sparks contests that set one noble house against another, encourages revolt against the innumerable legions of slaves, and sets the hag queens of the murder cults at one another's throats. Such turmoil frequently leaves quarters of Naggarond in scorched and blood-soaked ruin, but the Witch King cares not so long as the feeble perish and the strong thrive. At the heart of Naggarond stands the Black Tower. No mere fortress is this, but a city within a city. A maze of palaces, ramparts and towers huddle within its curtain walls and jut from its sheer sides. Here dwell those nobles held highest in Malekith's regard, an honour that brings wealth and patronage, but also danger. The Witch King has ever been a valuable monarch, generous when fortune smiles, but unflinchingly merciless when all does not go his way. Naggarond's court is therefore a place of rapid rises and meteoric descents. Few can play this game of politics for long, and none who take part die a natural death. The central bastion of this tower belongs to Malekith alone, and none save the Black Guard of Naggarond are granted entrance without the Witch King's permission. Neither torches nor lanterns are permitted within. Though he would never admit it, the Witch King has long been discomfited by wholesome flame. Many of these rooms and passageways lie entirely in gloom, and many others are dimly lit by the bloody glow of accursed sigils. Few Dark Elves enter these shadowed chambers without pressing cause, for they lie heavy with neglect, dust, and an unmistakable melancholy. When Naggarond was founded, the Witch King intended his citadel to rival the finery and splendour of Ulthuan's greatest mansions. However, as the millennia crawled by, Malekith lost the taste for fripperies and fleeting indulgence. The lower chambers, which once glittered with light and rang to the wild laughter of courtiers and companions, are now desolate and web-haunted, full of faded tapestries and haunted silence. Only in the upper reaches are the glories of yesteryear maintained. Here, in rooms bedecked with plunder from around the globe, the Witch King holds court and makes his plans against hated Ulthuan. The council chamber is a particularly gruesome spectacle. Its vaulted roof is lost in shadow, and its walls are draped in tapestries woven from bloodied hair. The jagged likenesses of cruel gods stare down from intricately carven buttresses, their eyes glowing in the darkness. At the centre of the room sits a vast circular table struck from a single slab of obsidian. 100 chairs of blackened bone and flayed skin sit alongside. Such are occupied only when the council meets. Others are permanently engaged, for their occupants are long dead, having displeased Malekith in ages past. It is whispered that one of the corpses was once close kin to the Witch King, a brother perhaps, or maybe even a son. Some of these dead councillors are desiccated and brittle, testament to their centuries of service. Others are relatively fresh, with maggots and beetles crawling through still fleshy skulls. Malekith's iron throne sits at the head of this table, but he much prefers to prowl around the perimeter so that no one can ever be certain where his fitful gaze lies. Occasionally, he will call for silence and make play of holding a one-sided conversation with one of the corpses. It is impossible to know whether he truly speaks with the dead, or merely does so for macabre effect. Certainly, no one has ever dared ask, nor do any question the need for such a council in a land bent to one supreme rule. It is simply Malekith's will, so it is done. When not consumed by matters of war and state, the Witch King retires to his personal rooms at the top of the citadel and the scrying chamber therein. It is said that there is no corner of the world hidden from Malekith's sorcerous vision, and that he can direct his view wherever his malicious intent demands. However, his gaze is ever drawn to the mist-shrouded Isle of Ulthuan, the birthright he so desperately wishes to claim as his own, or else see destroyed. GROND, the Tower of Prophecy. In the absolute north stands the slender spire of GROND. This is the domain of Malekith's mother, the beautiful seeress Morathi. From Grond's pinnacle, sorceresses of the Dark Convent can see through the snowstorms that whip about the tower and into the ever-shifting realm of chaos. It is said that the patterns of change therein hold the secrets of fate, and that all the mysteries of the world are laid bare to she who dares look. Every day black-clad riders gallop from the Tower of GRAEF, bearing prophecies southward to Naggarond. These foretell auspicious moments in which the Witch King will meet with success, or carry warnings of an enemy's growing power. Morathi rules GRAEF without compromise, and does not tolerate interference from outside. It is one thing for the Hag Sorceress to support Malekith in his rule, but quite another for her to accept it herself. The Witch King tolerates his mother's small rebellion, so long as her tithes are promptly delivered and generous in scope. And generous they are, for the mines beneath GRAEF have ever been rich in gold, silver, and gemstones of all kinds. Even after thousands of years, there remains sufficient wealth buried beneath GRAEF to buy the loyalty of every elf in Naggaroth. GRAEF is legendary as a luxurious palace of decadence, not just in Naggaroth, but in many distant lands also. The tales are rendered all the more alluring by a law that forbids male elves from entering its inner sanctums, save at Morathi's decree. These few who are admitted are at once the most cursed and blessed of mortals, for their lives and their deaths serve only the Hag Sorceress's pleasure. For those who do not catch Morathi's eye, there is only a life of battle against the horrors of the northern wastes. Demons, monsters, and worshippers of the Chaos Gods are drawn constantly to GRAEF and to the heady broth of sorcery and excess that flows about its walls. The defence of GRAEF is therefore a near ceaseless battle, fraught with danger and privation. Yet the Dark Elves who defend the ramparts never consider desertion to softer lands. Captivated by Morathi's beauty and their own desires, they are as much slaves to the Hag Sorceress as the wretches who toil in the mines below. KAROND, Tower of Despair. Even in a land where misery and torment are the currency of daily life, KAROND can be considered the bleakest of all refuges. The citadel stands sentinel on the edge of the Sea of Chill, perpetually battered by gale-force winds, icy rain, and tidal waves the size of mountains. Its folk can therefore be counted amongst the hardiest of hard people. Indeed, they have become so acclimatized to their frozen conditions that more temperate climes cause them a measure of discomfort. KAROND is known as Slaver's Gate, for it is here that the great reaving fleets bring their living cargo. Countless thousands die as they cross the wide seas to KAROND, stifled and suffocated in the holds of slave ships, or tortured to death for the amusement of the black-hearted crews. These are the lucky ones. When the survivors are finally unloaded onto the ice-reefed docks, they soon find that their torment is just beginning. There is no escape from KAROND. From the docks the slaves are brutally driven forth amidst jeering crowds, beaten onward by lash and scourge. Those that stumble are trampled, those who slip their spiked chains are flayed, then cast bodily into the icy ocean. Both forms of death are much appreciated by the madding spectators, who throw rocks to trip the panicked slaves and send servants to break the chains whilst the captors are still dockside, in the hopes of inciting even more violence. The slave markets are vast, and those captives that make it to the wide-open plazas beyond the docks are roughly examined and divided by age and gender, destined to labour in mines and quarries or drudge in the dungeons and kitchens of Naggaroth. Overlooking the markets are the slave traders' palaces, slab-sided mansions decorated with the scrimshawed bones of perished slaves. Night and day KAROND echoes with tortured wails, for its sorceresses delight in binding together their captive souls to their mortal remains. Trapped between life and death, these wretches haunt the streets of the Slavers' Gate, filling the dreams of their tormentors with delicious images of suffering and pain. The traders themselves seldom leave the comforts of their opulent homes, but can be occasionally lured into the rain-drowned plazas by news of a particularly impressive bounty. A captured high elf is the most valuable of prizes, and a wealthy slaver will gladly trade much of his remaining stock, or even members of his own family, for the opportunity to bring such a sweetmeat before his patron's tender mercies. For more commonplace cargoes, slavers hold audiences and auctions within their chambers, playing off the greed of corsair captains to ensure a healthy profit. The slave masters drive a hard bargain, and no fleet leaves KAROND with wealth equal to its expectations. However, no captain will challenge the terms of a trade once it has been completed, for they know that assassins aplenty lurk in the crowds, waiting silently for the slave master's commissions. Better to leave KAROND with a light purse, they reckon, than to never leave it at all. GANETH, City of Executioners. GANETH is a cursed place. A madness overtook the city long ago, a thirst for blood and flesh that ever since has only been kept in abeyance by some of the strictest laws in all Naggaroth. Only in GANETH are acts such as murder, thievery, and public debauchery considered to be crimes, a hard burden to bear for a people so steeped in thoughtless depravity. Worse, under GANETH law there is but a single penalty for infraction. The transgressor is led in chains to the summit of the highest sacrificial pyramid and beheaded. There can be only one punishment in Cain's chosen city. Only the foolish or the clever are lawbreakers in GANETH, and it is not always possible to tell the two apart until the executioner's blade sweeps down. The truly clever have made an elegant escape long before this point. This situation certainly does not mean that internecine rivalry is less prevalent in GANETH than in other cities. It is merely conducted in a different manner. The Dreadlords long ago learnt that commissioning a murder is as likely to end with their death as it is that of the victim. Therefore, they concentrate upon tricking rivals into acts of lawbreaking that can only be answered by the executioner's blade. Such plots are seldom anything other than subtle, and they can take years to finally reach fruition. GANETH is a den of shadow politics like no other, where every request or concession is merely a piece in a wider game of disgrace and death. There is one being in all of GANETH who is above its many laws. Crone Helebron has ruled the city almost since its founding and sees no reason to obey her own dictates, while she invites petitions from those who would purchase a portion of her immunity for suitable favors, naturally. Such requests are few and far between. It takes a scoundrel of a particularly bold or desperate sort to barefacedly admit lawbreaking intent to she who is the supreme enforcer. Only on Death Night, an eve of bloody excess in Cain's glorious name, is GANETH's order thrown completely to the winds. Elsewhere in Naggaroth, Death Night is celebrated almost exclusively by witch elves, and other dark elves do all they can to avoid being offered up as a sacrifice to the Lord of Murder. In GANETH, however, everyone participates in the madness of Death Night. It is the one brief interlude in which a year's worth of pent-up wickedness is allowed free rein. The great gates of the city are sealed, slaves and prisoners are set loose in the streets, and the very air crackles with anticipation. As the moon rises, madness descends. Wine and blood flow like water through the city. Wild screams split the night, and half-eaten corpses clog the gutters. Witch elves dance naked around the bodies of the slain. Flagstones grow slippery with spilled entrails, and everywhere stupefied elves lie entwined with one another atop the gore-drenched dead. Only as dawn rises and a great brass gong rings out does the debauchery cease. As the bleary-eyed survivors wearily drag themselves from the streets, the gates of Hellebrand's palace open, and her elite guards sweep into the charnel madness, searching for elves too sated to escape. These they drag to Hellebrand's chambers, and the great brass cauldron therein, whilst other hag queens choose to bathe in the gore of maidens. The blood queen of GANETH favours only that blood which is spiced by the corrupt insanity of Death Night. Hag GRAEF, the Dark CRAG. The Dark CRAG is a sinister and foreboding place, built at the bottom of a cold, dark canyon and completely surrounded by mountains of bare rock that stretch into the clouds. It is a city permanently in shadow, for no sunlight ever reaches its walls. Hag GRAEF is a place of twisted and impossible architecture. Its 8 black towers rise from the canyon floor like the ossified remains of some loathsome cephalopod. Between the towers are strung walkways, platforms and bridges of every conceivable shape and size. Some are fashioned from weathered timber and soot-stained bone. Others are crafted from jagged stone or woven from the silk of monstrous spiders. The larger platforms are so massive as to be towns and villages in their own right, and are supported by gantry works of iron and stone. It is upon these that the majority of Hag GRAEF's citizenry dwell, crammed into crooked mansions of cinder brick and fire-blackened wood. The towers are home only to the city's most powerful dreadlords. Cramped conditions, combined with the Dark Elves' peremptory nature, ensure that rivalries flare into violence with alarming regularity. Those who do not walk cautiously through Hag GRAEF's webwork of streets have their throats slit and bodies heaved into the morass of sewage and rotting flesh that covers the canyon floor. The rocks below Hag GRAEF are honeycombed with mines and quarries that are, in turn, threaded through with chain gangs of slaves who claw iron and jet-black stone from the belly of the world. This is the most miserable of existences, toiling far from any natural light, starved of all but the meanest food, and chilled to the bone by the piercing wind that howls through the tunnels. Even after death, there is no respite. The mines are riddled with veins of warpstone, whose baleful power animates the dead and keeps them laboring until they collapse into piles of worn bone. Driven by the wealth of its mines, Hag GRAEF has risen to become Naggaroth's second city. In fact, it is so prosperous that its armies and influence overshadow even those of Naggarond. So eager are Hag GRAEF's people to escape their abyssal home that the forced conscription present in other cities is completely unnecessary here. Indeed, over the centuries, GRAEF has earned a reputation for producing, if not the most disciplined fighters, then certainly the most desperate. The city's mercenary rulers, ever eager for profit, have taken to selling warriors into service elsewhere in Naggaroth, taking with it the opportunity to infiltrate spies. So rich is GRAEF in soldiery, slave and coin, that were its 8 great families ever truly united in purpose, they could doubtless overthrow the Witch King. Naturally, Malekith is aware of this, and spares no effort in keeping the Dark Crag's nobles at each other's throats. He need scarcely bother, however, with so much wealth at stake. Intrigue and betrayal are already rife. GRAEF's greatest prize is the position of First Dreadlord. He who holds the title is the nominal ruler of the city and all its domains. The First Dreadlord sets the tariffs that govern the city's trade and is in excellent position to take a cut of all merchantry. With this wealth comes a life of patronage and grand opulence beyond the dreams of other elves, but few incumbents survive long in office. Indeed, many of GRAEF's social elite consider the lavish ceremony of ascension to be little more than the official opening of a new round of a particularly deadly game. None of this deters the city's nobles for competing for the First Dreadlord's chains of office. Arrogance is as rife here as it is in any other quarter of Naggaroth, and no Dark Elf believes himself foolish enough to end his rule shot, stabbed, poisoned, garroted, or beheaded. He cannot be persuaded of the danger, even though these things have happened to previous rulers more times than can be counted. Life is scarcely less competitive elsewhere in GRAEF. The 8 families constantly vie with one another for the First Dreadlord's favour, even as they plot to have him violently removed from office. Even family ties do not guarantee loyalty. Many a brother or daughter has risen to new heights over the corpses of their siblings thanks to the timely use of poison or by pressing enough gold into an assassin's hand. It should, therefore, not be surprising that Cainite assassin cults flourish nowhere in Naggaroth, as well as they do in GRAEF, where there are always dreadlords seeking to remove rivals or in need of protection from the machinations of their enemies, or their friends. Even so, there are insufficient hired blades to meet the incredible demand, and an assassin might well answer to 100 different masters over the course of a single year. Under such circumstances, discretion and silence have become traits valued as highly as more traditional skills. As a result, many assassins sew their mouths closed, sever their own vocal cords, or nail their jaws shut to ensure that they are no longer physically capable of revealing an employer's identity. KAROND, Tower of Doom. KAROND serves as the Witch King's chief shipyard, for it is here that the keels are laid for many thousands of raiding vessels. This is a more sprawling city than others in Naggaroth, stretching from the banks of the Red Venom River up to the trackless pine forests of the Dusk Ridge. It is from these ancient woodlands that the Dark Elves harvest the black timber from which they build their sleek-hulled warships. The Naggarothi do not perform this work themselves, of course, for such labours are considered well beneath them, but instead set thousands of slaves to the task. As the woodlands receded, their hearts torn out by hooked chains or consumed by dark fire, the ever-expanding streets of KAROND have spilled into the gap. Year by year, the city swells further, having grown far on the labours of its slaves and despoliation of the surrounding land. Once there was but one great tower looking over the Red Venom River, Now the dusk ridge bristles with jagged minarets. With each wave of expansion, new ramparts have been raised, not only to protect the city as a whole, but also to defend each tower from its neighbours. As a result, KAROND's streets are tangled and maze-like, marred by half-collapsed buildings, severed concourses, and entire districts buried forever as newer and more impressive fortifications are raised. KAROND is also famed for its beastmasters. It was here, many long centuries ago, that the knights of GRAEF brought the first cold ones to be broken, and much later that the ferocious Carobdis of the deeps were bent to the Dark Elves' will. Now, manticore pens, harpy cages, and other enclosures are as common in KAROND as the temples of Cain. Both are outnumbered by the pelt-draped shrines of Anathrema, for the goddess of the savage hunt has ever been the patron of beastmasters. Thus, when the armies of KAROND go to war, they do so in Anathrema's name, driving her savage children before them to break the enemy lines with tooth and claw. KALDRA, the Forgotten City. KALDRA was once a mighty fortress that dominated the landward passes between Naggarond and the Ironfrost Glacier. Now it is a scarred and ruined crater, surrounded by the outflung remnants of its own walls, a testament to Malekith's fickle rage. It was the Witch King that wrought KALDRA's ruin, meeting the rebellion within its walls with all the sorcerous might at his command. Thousands perished in that one night of horror and fury, and thousands more were taken in bondage to Naggarond, there to die in its fire pits and gladiatorial arenas. The Watchtowers. Naggaroth is a land in little danger of invasion. Few enemy fleets survive more than a few hours in its corsair-infested waters, let alone long enough to close with the jagged coast and land troops. The only real dangers come from the Lustrian legions to the south and the hordes of chaos that roam the frozen wastelands to the north. The Dark Elves consider that they need no fixed defences against the former, for the lizard men stir themselves to meaningful assault, but infrequently. The latter, however, have proven so undeterred by their appalling losses and ignominious defeats that the Naggarothi have founded many great citadels to hold the hordes of Northmen at bay. Each of these watchtowers is the size of a city, provisioned to withstand years of siege and garrisoned with a great host of Naggaroth's foremost warriors. Thus have threats from the realm of chaos been held at bay, at least for now. The coveted lands. The Dark Elves will never be content ruling only Naggaroth, for they consider all Ulthuan to be their birthright. But there are two regions of their sundered homes that they desire above all. The Shadowlands are the remains of ancient Naggaroth, where Anarion held court at Anlec, and from these lands the ancestors of the Naggarothi sprung. Though the Dark Elves have invaded Naggaroth many times, no conquest has endured. Each time Anlec has been rebuilt, the Phoenix King's soldiers have cast it down. North of Anlec lies the Blighted Isle, site of the Shrine of Cain. Many wars have been fought across its skull-strewn plains, and at night the spirits of the dead battle anew, forever captured by the will of Cain. The struggle for the Shrine of Cain is symbolic of the struggle in the soul of the elf race. None can say how it will end, or indeed, if it ever will. The Boiling Sea. On the west coast of Naggaroth lies a realm of islands and monster-infested waters known as the Boiling Sea. It was created many millennia ago, before the recorded history of the elves had begun. An immense earthquake ripped apart the coasts bordering the far sea and toppled them into the seas, fashioning the patchwork of islands that now run along the length of the western coast. The earthquake also tore deep rents in the seabed, terrible wounds in the world's flesh that have never quite healed. The earthquake also tore deep rents in the seabed, terrible wounds in the world's flesh that have never healed. Through these fissures, molten lava surges up from the world's core, heating the water and creating great bursts of explosive vapors. In parts, the sea literally boils, giving rise to the region's name. Of all the Dark Elves' worships, only the Black Arks dare to enter this inhospitable and dangerous territory. They do so for one reason only, to capture the monstrous sea creatures that have become such an important part of their fleet. Although many parts of the boiling seas are deadly to all forms of life, there are others where the mineral-rich waters teem with all manner of savage predators. Many such beasts, notably the ferocious helldrakes and the vast sea dragons, have long served the Dark Elves as vessels of war, at least since the Naggarothi learned how to sorcerously fuse battle fortresses to the beasts' backs. With more and more of these creatures brought back from the boiling sea, the Dark Elf fleets have been dramatically transformed. Many Black Arks are now accompanied by flotillas of these primeval terrors. Names of power. Family ties are seldom flaunted in Naggaroth. For a Dark Elf to achieve true renown, he must do so through his own actions, not through the long-ago deeds of some withered sire. For this reason, few Dark Elves betray their lineage in name or title, but instead adopt warrior names chosen to strike fear into the hearts of their allies and enemies. Such titles must be backed up by deeds if they are to have any chance of gaining acceptance and renown. So it is common for Dark Elf lordlings to adopt names that reflect their own vile proclivities, or that can at least be proven by fearsome acts. A Naggarothi who assumes the warrior name Venomblade had best go to battle with his weapons coated in the most deadly of poisons, lest he suffer mockery and likely a poisoned death. Similarly, a noble who takes the name Severspine will go to almost theatrical lengths to remind other Dark Elves of its appropriateness. Curiously, some of these warrior names have now become so renowned that they are handed down in exactly the same way as the family names that have been all but abandoned. Thus have the sons of 5 generations borne the Fellheart name, and thus has a warrior named Chillblade served at Malekith's right hand since his ascension, even though no elf of that name has lived longer than 100 years. The Dark Elves see nothing contradictory in this behaviour, for while a family name is granted merely for having been born, a warrior name will only be ceded to a progeny who has performed the deeds to deserve it. As such, the latter will always be worth more than the former, even if both are handed down through blood. The Underworld Sea. For hundreds of years, the Dark Elf raiding fleets were confined to the Sea of Chaos and the Great Ocean. Then they discovered the Underworld Sea, a huge underground water system that links the Sea of Chaos to Naggaroth's western coast. The Underworld Sea is a treacherous place consisting of labyrinthine mazes of dark tunnels and strange caves. Movement is dangerous even on the well-known routes, for cave-ins and flash floods are a constant danger. There are also many strange and cruelly predatory creatures that inhabit this unearthly subterranean realm, and their eyes are far more accustomed to the gloom than those of the Dark Elves on whom they prey. The most accomplished explorers of the underworld sea come from the Shade tribes, mountain dwellers who forsook the life of the bleak cities in ages past. Yet even they have only uncovered a small fraction of the underworld sea's secrets. Each decade brings new discoveries, and rumors abound of an entire lost civilization hidden deep within the underground caverns.